What happens when a team blessed with defensive depth faces a glaring offensive void? Do they stand pat, or do they pull the trigger on a deal that could define their entire rebuild? The Montreal Canadiens find themselves at a fascinating crossroads. Folks, while other franchises scramble desperately for defensive help, the Habs are sitting on a treasure trove of blue line talent. But here's the kicker. Their forward group needs a serious injection of firepower, and GM Kent Hughes knows it. The whispers around the league are getting louder. Montreal is preparing to leverage their defensive riches to land a legitimate top six forward, and the March 6th trade deadline might be when the fireworks finally explode. Let's paint the picture clearly. The Canadiens have built something special on their back end. Between established NHL defenders and a pipeline bursting with promising prospects, Montreal's blue line depth chart reads like a fantasy hockey manager's dream. But in the cutthroat world of professional hockey, having too much of one thing while lacking in another is a recipe for mediocrity. And Hughes didn't orchestrate this rebuild to settle for mediocrity. According to Lyle Richardson of the Hockey News, the writing is practically etched in stone. Given the Canadiens' recent trade history, it wouldn't be surprising if they peddle another blue liner to add a forward. This isn't speculation pulled from thin air, it's pattern recognition. Hughes has already demonstrated his willingness to move defensemen when the opportunity presents itself, and with the forward market looking increasingly barren, the March deadline represents Montreal's golden window. Here's where it gets intriguing. Richardson adds a crucial caveat. A dire dearth of available talent in the trade market suggests the March 6th trade deadline might be their best opportunity to do so. Translation: the Canadiens aren't just thinking about making a move, they're strategically timing it. Strike too early, and you might miss out on better options. Wait too long, and the cupboard goes bare. Hughes is playing chess while others are playing checkers. Before we dive into potential trade chips, let's establish one non-negotiable fact. Kaiden Guhle isn't going anywhere. Despite multiple teams reportedly inquiring about the young defender's availability, Montreal has drawn a line in the sand. Guhle just inked a 5-year deal worth $5.5 million annually, and for good reason. His combination of mobility, physical presence, and hockey IQ makes him a cornerstone piece of this rebuild. The Canadiens view him as untouchable, and rightfully so. But if Guhle is off the table, who becomes the bait in Hughes' fishing expedition? Marco D'Amico of RG.org has identified the realistic candidates, and each name tells its own story. Arber Xhekaj, the fan-favorite enforcer with surprising offensive instincts, represents raw potential wrapped in sandpaper. Jayden Struble brings steady, reliable play without the flash, making him an attractive piece for teams seeking depth. Then there's Adam Engstrom, a prospect whose development trajectory suggests NHL readiness sooner rather than later. The wild card? Alexander Carrier. Once David Reinbacher, Montreal's 5th overall pick from 2023, arrives and establishes himself, Carrier could become expendable. The veteran defender brings legitimate NHL experience and would appeal to contenders seeking playoff-tested reliability. In other words, Hughes has options, plenty of them. The forward hunt, dream targets and realistic acquisitions. So what exactly are the Canadiens hunting for? Ideally, Hughes wants a legitimate second-line center, someone who can drive possession, create offensive opportunities, and eventually slot behind Nick Suzuki as Montreal's 1-2 punch down the middle. The names being floated around: Ryan O'Reilly and Nazem Kadri have both surfaced in trade rumors, veterans who bring championship pedigree and two-way excellence. But here's where the plot thickens. Montreal has also been linked to Kiefer Sherwood of the Vancouver Canucks, a gritty, energetic winger whose relentless forechecking and surprising offensive touch have made him one of the league's most underrated players this season. Sherwood isn't a flashy name, but he's exactly the type of complementary piece that championship teams are built around. The catch? Nothing is imminent. Vancouver hasn't granted permission for teams to speak directly with Sherwood, meaning any potential deal remains in the exploratory phase. TSN's Darren Dreger recently added fuel to the speculation fire, stating, I keep looking at Montreal, one of those teams that most definitely is continually kicking tires. Dreger specifically wondered about a potential fit with the St. Louis Blues and their available forward assets. The Blues, currently in sell mode, possess several intriguing pieces that could interest Hughes. Veterans with term remaining who could contribute immediately while fitting Montreal's timeline. Here's what separates the Canadiens from many other suitors: financial maneuverability. Hughes currently has $3.7 million in cap space to work with, and while that might not sound like a fortune, it's enough to make meaningful additions, especially if Montreal is willing to retain salary or take on contracts with term. More importantly, the Canadiens possess one of the deepest prospect pools in the entire NHL. That means Hughes can construct trade packages that don't necessarily revolve around roster players. Want a blue-chip prospect to sweeten the deal? Montreal's got them. Need a mid-tier prospect with upside? The Habs have those in abundance. This flexibility makes Montreal a dangerous player in any trade negotiation. Few forwards are truly unaffordable if Hughes assembles the right package. A combination of a roster defenseman, a prospect, and draft capital could unlock almost any realistic target. The question isn't whether Montreal can make a splash, it's whether Hughes identifies the right player worth splashing for. Let's zoom out for a moment and examine the bigger picture. The Canadiens aren't a playoff team this season, and that's perfectly fine. This rebuild was always designed as a multi-year process, with sustainable success as the ultimate goal rather than premature playoff appearances. But that doesn't mean Hughes should sit idle. Adding a legitimate top six forward now accomplishes several objectives simultaneously. First, it accelerates the development of Montreal's young core by providing them with a proven line mate. Second, it demonstrates to the fan base and players that management is committed to winning, not just accumulating assets indefinitely. Third, it capitalizes on a buyer's market where desperate contenders might overpay for defensive help. The March 6th deadline represents the sweet spot. By then, the playoff picture will have crystallized, sellers will have revealed themselves, and Hughes will have maximum information to make an informed decision. Patience has been a hallmark of his tenure, but so has striking decisively when opportunities present themselves. Of course, every trade carries inherent risk. Moving a young defenseman for a forward means betting that your remaining depth can absorb the loss. It means trusting that prospects like Reinbacher, Lane Hutson, and Logan Mailloux will develop as projected. It means accepting that you might be trading future potential for present production. But here's the counterargument. At some point, you have to convert assets into impact players. Hoarding prospects and draft picks indefinitely is how rebuilds stagnate. Hughes has done the hard work of accumulating talent. Now comes the delicate art of deploying it strategically. The Canadian situation is unique. They're not mortgaging the future for a desperate playoff push. They're not trading core pieces out of panic. Instead, they're leveraging an area of organizational strength to address a clear weakness, all while maintaining their long-term vision. That's textbook asset management. As we barrel toward the trade deadline, expect the Canadiens' rumor mill to intensify. Hughes will continue his due diligence, exploring every available option and maintaining multiple conversations simultaneously. Some names will emerge as serious possibilities, others will fade as asking prices prove too steep. The most likely scenario? Montreal makes a calculated move involving one of their expendable defensemen, probably Xhekaj, Struble, or Carrier, packaged with additional assets to land a top-9 forward with term remaining. It won't be a headline-grabbing blockbuster that breaks the internet, but it will be a smart, strategic addition that makes the Canadiens better both now and moving forward. The alternative scenario, Hughes stands pat, seems increasingly unlikely given the public reporting and the team's obvious needs. This front office hasn't been shy about making moves when the value proposition makes sense, and all indicators suggest they're actively working the phones. The Montreal Canadiens are positioned to make waves before the trade deadline, and their defensive depth gives them unique leverage in a seller's market. While Kaiden Guhle remains untouchable, several other blue liners could become trade chips in the pursuit of forward help. With $3.7 million in cap space, one of the league's deepest prospect pools, and a GM unafraid to pull the trigger on significant moves, Montreal has all the ingredients necessary to land a meaningful addition. The March 6th deadline looms large. Will Hughes convert defensive surplus into offensive firepower? All signs point to yes. The only questions remaining are who, when, and at what cost. One thing's certain, the Canadiens aren't content to simply watch the deadline pass by. They're hunting, they're motivated, and they have the ammunition to get a deal done. So, what do you think? Should the Canadiens trade from their defensive depth to land a top 6 forward? Or should they stay patient and let their prospects develop? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're as fired up about this potential trade deadline drama as we are, smash that like button. The next few weeks are going to be absolutely electric in Montreal,